You know, over the last couple of weeks, we've been in this series called This Changes Everything, and we've been talking about how we can make some changes in our lives that could make a difference in the lives of other people. And so we started out, the big idea throughout this entire series has been this, that change, it starts with me. And if we're willing to make some changes in our lives, that it could change or impact the lives of other people. And because of what we've experienced, because of the change that has happened in our lives, the goal of this series has really been to kind of challenge us to help point others in that same direction, to help us be a messenger for Christ. And so today, the reason I started out by asking that question, what's the most amazing thing that you've ever experienced, is this. My hope is that by the end of today's message, that what you would see, what you would explore as we dig into this text that we're going to look at today is really how Jesus changes everything and how that's the most amazing thing that you could ever possibly experience. Now, if you've got a Bible or a Bible app on your smartphone, go ahead and turn with me to the book of Mark. Mark chapter 5 is where we're going to be at today. And it's in Mark chapter 5 that we're going to dig into some pretty amazing things that Jesus does on this one particular day. Now, before we get to that, though, I want to set this up and where we're going by saying simply this. Like, I know in this room today, there are those of you who are at different places in your spiritual journey with Christ. That some of you have been on this journey for some time, that maybe you made a decision to follow Christ when you were a kid, and you've been living for Him for the last 10, 15, or even longer than that. You've been living this relationship with Christ for a long time. I also realize that there are some of you who are maybe new to this spiritual journey, that maybe you've only been in this walk, in this relationship with Christ for the last year, or maybe the last few months, or even the last few weeks. And then I also recognize that in this room today, there are probably some of you here today who are just still kind of trying to figure out if Jesus is who He said He was, and if He's someone that you believe to be true. And you know, my hope is that through today's message, that wherever it is, where it comes to your spiritual journey with Christ, that you would see how Jesus changes everything and the difference that He can make, not only in your life, but in the lives of others as well. And you know, I love what happens here in Mark chapter 5. To set up where we're going today, in fact, though, I want to go to the end of Mark chapter 5. I want to go to the last verse in Mark chapter 5, verse 42, and the second half of that verse. And I want you to notice what Mark says here. He says, they were overwhelmed and they were totally amazed. Now, the they in this verse is describing the crowd of people and the disciples that are gathered around Jesus in this moment. Now, the question is, what is it that caused them to first be overwhelmed and then to be totally amazed? They had to experience something, right? They had to have experienced something amazing in their lives. But what we will see as we dig into this text today is it wasn't just one thing that they experienced, but there's a few different things that happen in this day that caused the disciples and the crowd of people to first be overwhelmed and then to be totally amazed. And so let's go back to the morning. As we open up Mark chapter 5, what we read is that Jesus and His disciples, they've arrived in this region called Gerasenes. It's a wild place. Like, you could literally say the tagline for it is, what happens in Gerasenes stays in Gerasenes. Like it was the Las Vegas of Jesus' day. And we read that the disciples and Jesus, they've been traveling all night to get there. They'd been on this boat, and in the midst of their traveling, there's this terrible storm that rises up on the lake. And the disciples, they're not even sure if they're going to make it to where they were headed. Like, they were afraid that the boat was going to sink and they were going to end up at the bottom of the lake. And in this moment, in the middle of the night, Jesus, He stands up in the boat and He begins to talk to the wind and the waves. Now, there's a few things there. If you've ever been on a boat in the middle of a storm, you know that you don't stand up on the boat. And so the disciples had to be thinking, Jesus, what are you doing? Like, why are you standing up? And also, why are you talking to the wind and the waves? Like, we've seen you do some pretty cool things, but you're like maybe a few screws loose here on this one, right, Jesus? And so what they see is that Jesus talks to the wind and the waves. He says these words, silence, be still. And in the next moment, the wind and the waves, even though the disciples aren't sure what Jesus is doing, the wind and the waves are calm. And so Jesus, He's already done something that's really pretty amazing, and He even hasn't hit the morning yet, and it's about to get better than that. And as this day starts, we read that they dock the boat, they get on land, and notice what it says here in Mark chapter 5, verse 2. It says, when Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by evil spirits came out of the tombs to meet Him. And my guess is now this wasn't the Gerasenes Tourism Bureau's ideal way of having the guests and the tourists welcome to this region. Like this wasn't the ideal way, but when Jesus and the disciples get out of the boat, this is who they encounter. And what we read here in Mark chapter 5 is that this guy, he's completely out of control. They've tried to chain him down. They've tried to keep him captive because they didn't want him to be the welcome wagon for the tourists in that region, but there was nothing that they could do to keep him down. You see, this guy was powerful. My guess is, as I'm reading this, the image that I get of this guy is he's kind of like the Incredible Hulk, right? Like nothing can stop him. He's got this superhuman strength. And we continue to read about this guy in verses 6 to 8. It says this, it said, when Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him. They ran to meet him. They bowed low before him, and with a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." Now, notice a few things that take place here in this moment. The first thing that we see happen here is this, that this guy, he literally runs to the feet of Jesus, and he falls at the feet of Jesus. Now, this wasn't an act of worship by this guy. Instead, this was an act of submission. And what we see in this moment is that Jesus had this superior power over this guy who could not be changed, this guy who could not be held captive is now bowing before Jesus. And look, what this shows us about Jesus is this, that no matter what you're going through right now, no matter the difficulties that you might be experiencing in life, the struggles that you're going through, whether that's a broken marriage, a financial struggle, or even addiction, whatever it is in your life that is holding you down right now, understand that Jesus has the power to help you overcome those things in your life. And that whatever it is that you're dealing with, understand that all you have to do is turn to him and give it to him because he can heal you from those things. You know, I love how Mark describes this scene. He gives us this detail. He says that this man ran and he runs towards Jesus to meet him. It wasn't a casual greeting where he just walks out to the beach and gets close to these guys. No, this guy is running towards Jesus. And I got to be honest with you. If I'm one of the disciples on that day and I see this kind of crazy guy screaming and shrieking and running towards me, I'd be like, hey, Jesus, I'm out. This dude is crazy, right? But this guy, he runs to Jesus. There's a reason why Mark tells us that in the story. And here's what we have to understand. You see, when people experience Jesus, they will come running towards him. Because when you experience Jesus, you really experience Jesus, it changes everything. And rather than running away from him, what you see is that you will end up running towards him. And look, my guess is that there are some of you here today who have been running away from Jesus for a long time. And the word that God might want you to hear today is this: stop running away and start running towards me because I can help you. I'm there for you. My arms are open wide. I'm ready to accept you in. You see, when people encounter Jesus, they'll start running towards him rather than running away from him. There's a second thing that we see here in these verses about Jesus, and that is this. Even the foulest demons of hell, they know who Jesus is. And notice what they call Jesus in that moment. They say, Son of the Most High God. The demons know who this guy is. They know the power that Jesus has, and they know that it's about to change everything for this guy who's been imprisoned in his own body. This guy, we read, his name is called Legion. It's not just because of one demon that's in him, but he's got somewhere in the upwards of 6,000 demons residing in him. Now, I'm a math guy, and I love math, but this math equation doesn't make a lot of sense. 6,000 to 1, this should be no contest, but that's exactly what we have to understand. It is no contest when it comes to the power of Jesus. That Jesus has the power to help you overcome your past, and your hurts are no match for what Jesus can offer to each and every one of you. And when you understand that, when you truly understand that, it changes everything. And so these demons, they know what Jesus can do. And we read next that they begin to beg and they begin to plead with Jesus. Hey, Jesus, would you just give us a break? Don't kill us off completely. See those pigs over there on the hillside? Would you send us into the pigs and just let us go free that way? Well, verse 13, we pick back up. It says this. It says, so Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake, and they drowned in the water. Jesus is like, look, fine, if you want to go into the pigs, you can go into the pigs. And so he casts the demons out of this guy. The pigs go, or the demons go into the pigs. And then what we see is that the pigs, they start running towards the lake. And despite what it says, pigs can't fly, and it's pretty clear. Pigs can't drown. They can't swim either because they drown in the lake. But Jesus, he's just taking care of the demon-possessed problem of this man. He's taking care of the demons in this region, and things should be good, right? Like, people should be excited about this. But what we read next is that the crowd of people in this region, they come to Jesus and they're ticked off. Well, why is that? Well, you see, Jesus has just destroyed the bacon industry in this region for the next decade, and nobody's happy about that. Like, they know what that means, right? It's turkey bacon for the next 10 years, and let's be real. What is turkey bacon anyway? And these people know, right? They know that there's no more candied bacon, there's no more BLTs, there's no more bacon mac and cheese, there's no more bacon rack chicken, and there's no more of this stuff. Check this out. That's called swine apple. I didn't even know what that was until a few weeks ago, and it doesn't really apply to the message, but I had to show it to you because it's just so amazing. I was watching Chopped the other day, and this was on there. It's bacon wrapped pineapple stuffed with spare ribs. It gets grilled. That just sounds amazing to me, right? But the thing is, Jesus has just destroyed the pigs in the industry by drowning them, and none of that stuff, not even swine apple, is available anymore. And so the people, they're not happy about it. But here's the thing. You see, that one encounter with Jesus, it changed everything for this guy. And maybe like Jesus, you're here today, and you might be encountering Jesus for the very first time. That the reason that you walk through these doors today here at Eaton High School is because you received an invitation from someone. And what God wants you to hear today is that one encounter with Jesus can change everything. And you see, for those of us who have already encountered Jesus in our lives and we've decided to follow him, then we know the difference that he can make. One encounter with Jesus can restore a broken marriage. One encounter with Jesus can turn a life around. One encounter with Jesus can heal the hurting. One encounter with Jesus can change everything. And for this guy formerly known as Legion, what happens next is incredible. After Jesus is told by the guys in the town that they no longer want him around because they realize there won't be bacon for breakfast the next day, they get back in this boat, they get ready to head over to the other side of the lake, and then this guy who Jesus has just healed, he comes to Jesus, he says, Jesus, can I come with you? I can't believe what you were able to do for me. Thank you so much. Can I just come along? I want to watch what you're going to do next. And Jesus says, look, I need you to stay here. I need you to go, and I need you to tell your friends and your neighbors and your family members all that I have done. Share with them what has happened to you. So this guy, after maybe a little hesitation, he agrees to stay back. And notice what we read next in verse 20. It says, so the man started off to visit the 10 towns of the region, and he began to proclaim the great things that Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed at what he told. You catch what it says there? It says everyone was amazed at what he told them. Like, I can imagine people seeing this guy coming and they're like, hide your kids, hide your wives, hide everyone because Legion is coming for you. But then they see this dude and they're like, something's different about him. He's not screaming and shrieking anymore. And he's just kind of walking towards us and everything seems to be normal. And they see that he's now sane, and he tells them everything that has happened to him in this moment. And what does it say? It says they were amazed. You see, one encounter with Jesus changed everything. This guy who was possessed by demons has now become this messenger for Jesus to this region of people because he's telling them now that Jesus changes everything. And because of this message that he's sharing, because he has this experience in his life, guess what? Other people start believing this. It says that many people believed. He's like the first missionary that Jesus sends out to tell people about what he has done. And here's what I want you to hear today. You see, one encounter with Jesus changed everything for this guy. And for those of us who have been changed by Jesus, we need to be like him, and we need to tell others. We should never keep this message to ourselves, that we need to let other people know. That is why Compass North Fort Worth exists. We talked about it last week. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15 says this: see to it that no one misses out on the grace of God. The reason that this campus exists is because there was a group of people who said, we are not going to miss out on the opportunity to share this message of who Jesus is with people in this area because they need to hear about the hope that he brings. And for some of you here today, maybe you're here and you feel like your past can't be forgiven, or that the mistakes that you've made are just too bad, or that there's no way that you could ever be accepted into God's kingdom because your past is just too bad. Understand that is a lie that Satan wants you to hear, but that is not the truth. And what I hope that you hear today is through this story, I hope that you hear that Jesus can use anyone who is willing. Now, Jesus has already healed a guy before breakfast time, but the day is just getting started. We read that the disciples and Jesus, they head across the lake, they get to the other side, and guess what? As soon as they get to the other side, there's a crowd of people who's already waiting for Jesus. And in that crowd on that day, there's one of the local religious leaders, a guy who ran the synagogue by the name of Jairus. And he comes to the feet of Jesus and he bows down before him. Now, this was unusual. This was something that shouldn't have happened. You see, back in Jesus' day, the religious leaders and Jesus, they didn't get along very well. In fact, at this point in time in Jesus' life and ministry, they were already at the point where they were trying to find every way that they could to get rid of Jesus. But on this day, something caused this guy named Jairus to be willing to humble himself and come before Jesus, because Jesus, he knew something about him. And this guy named Jairus, he falls to the feet of Jesus and he says, Jesus, I need you to come to my house. I need you to come now. My daughter, she's not doing well. The doctor says it's not much longer. She doesn't have much time, and I know what you can do. I know that you can heal her. And you see, Jairus knew something else about Jesus, something that we need to know as well, and that is this: not only can one encounter with Jesus change everything, but one touch from Jesus can change everything. And so Jesus and Jairus, we read they head back to the house, and there's this crowd of people following him. Well, in the crowd on that day, there's another woman who's in need of a touch from Jesus. We read about her in verses 25 and 26. Listen to what it says. It says, a woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She suffered a great deal for many doctors, and over the years, she had spent everything she had to pay them, but she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. So we read this woman is sick. She's been sick for 12 years. No one has been able to diagnose her problem. There's been no cure for the thing that she's been going through. And she had heard about who Jesus was. She heard, maybe he could help me. She thought to herself, maybe I'll just approach him because maybe that touch from Jesus will be all that I need to restore my health. Look at verses 27 and 28. Listen to what it says. It says she had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd. She touched his robe, for she thought to herself, if I can just touch his robe, I'll be healed. And so this woman, she reaches out her hand towards Jesus. She grabs a hold of his robe as he's passing by. And in that moment, as she touches his robe, guess what happens? She gets healed of her illness. See, that one touch from Jesus changed everything. And what this moment shows us is that the past that you feel trapped by, the difficult situation that you cannot seem to figure out how to get out of, the wounds from your past that you can't seem to overcome, Jesus says, just turn to me, because one touch from me can change everything in your life. And look, that touch can come in the most unexpected and unusual of ways. You know, one of the responses that I received on Facebook when I asked that question, what's the most amazing thing you've ever experienced, came from one of our staff members at one of our other campuses. And she wrote this, listen to her words. She said, I was struggling with feeling worthy of God while my marriage was ending, and I was terrified for my son, Gavin. He was in kindergarten. It was told to him that the divorce was all his fault. He'd stopped playing at recess, stopped eating, and he was literally withering away in front of me. I'd gone back out to water one of the plants, which is a small plant Gavin planted the week before at church. I started bawling uncontrollably, and I got on my knees and I prayed God would show me in some big writing in the sky kind of way that I was doing the right thing for my boys and that Gavin would be okay. I needed desperately for God to tell me that he had his hands on my boy. When I got up and I wiped my tears, Gavin's pot was in my line of vision. The water from my eyes had made a distinct cross on that pot. That cross was a promise that God had my kid. I had the most pure sense of peace in that moment. She also attached a picture of that pot. You can see it on the screen. She said this is the pot now. Although it's a little rotted, the cross is still clear, and I often go to it when I'm struggling over fear from my boy. You see, what she experienced that day was a touch from Jesus. And that one touch from Jesus changed everything. One touch from Jesus changed everything for this woman who was sick and needed healing. Unfortunately, as all of this is taking place, what we read is that Jairus' daughter, she ends up passing away. A messenger comes to Jairus and calls Jairus over and he says, "Excuse me, sir, I got to tell you something. I'm sorry, sir, but your daughter, unfortunately, she didn't make it." And they're trying to be quiet about this. They're trying not to let anyone hear, but it's just loud enough that Jesus is standing by. And notice what Jesus does next. I love what Jesus does next. Verse 36 says, "But Jesus overheard them and he said to Jairus, 'Don't be afraid, just have faith.'" I can imagine this scene going down here. Like Jesus sees this guy come and he's starting to whisper to Jairus, but Jesus kind of listening in on it and he hears what's going on. He's like, "Hey guys, I can hear everything you're saying here. Do you forget who I am? Like, I'm the Alpha and the Omega. I'm the beginning and the end. I already healed a woman who was bleeding for 12 years. I healed a demonic man on the other side of the lake. I took 6,000 demons and cast them out. This dead body ain't going to stop me." And so Jesus pushes through all the tears and the commotion. He heads to the house. He's like, "Let me see this little girl." Now, Mosaic law, which is what they would have been living under during this time, in this age, said you didn't ever go near a dead body like this because you become unclean. It also said that you didn't go near the demon-possessed. You wouldn't get near the demonic because you'd be unclean. It also said you never went near someone who was dealing with an issue of blood like this woman, but that doesn't stop Jesus. My guess is if someone called Jesus out on that day, Jesus would be like, "Look, I've been breaking laws all day. Ain't nothing going to stop me now." And so Jesus, we read, he knelt down next to the bed of this little girl and he grabs her hand and he says these words, "Little girl, get up." And guess what happens next? Here we are back at verse 42, and the first part of verse 42 says this, "And the girl, who was 12 years old, immediately stood up and walked around. They were overwhelmed and totally amazed." Do you understand what Mark's saying here in Mark chapter 5? He says one encounter with Jesus and everything changes. One touch from Jesus and everything changes. One word from Jesus and everything changes. One word from Jesus can make your dead dreams come to life. One word from Jesus can make dead things come to life. One word from Jesus can make dead relationships come to life. One word from Jesus can make lives stuck in addiction come to life. You see, Jesus changes everything, and all he asks us to do is just have faith. That's what he tells Jairus here in this moment. That's what he asks us to do. And at the end of the day, the disciples, they'd witnessed 3 amazing things. My guess is it probably wasn't unlike most days with Jesus. I mean, they'd see Jesus do amazing thing after amazing thing, day after day after day. But at the end of the day, I love what Mark says happens here. It says in verse 42, they were overwhelmed and they were totally amazed. You see, at the end of the day, what Jesus had done was the most amazing thing, and they were amazed. They'd seen this all before, but it was still so amazing to them, and that's how we ought to always respond as well. What Jesus has done for us ought to always amaze us and always overwhelm us. Do you understand what Jesus did for you and for me? He went to the cross. He paid the price for our sins. He died on the cross so that we could have life. It's the most amazing thing. And when Jesus went to the cross, Jesus changed everything. And all he asks us to do is just have faith. Just turn to him. Now look, here's the thing I think we have to be always aware of in our walk. If we ever get to the place in our spiritual journey where we think that we've seen it all before, then we'll never learn anything new again. Don't allow your heart to become hard to the amazing things that Jesus does each and every single day. And look, at the end of the day, when we get to ask that question, what's the most amazing thing that we've ever experienced? My hope is our answer would always be Jesus. My hope is that at some point in time that each person sitting here would be able to say, Jesus is the most amazing thing that I've ever experienced because Jesus has changed everything in your life. And for those of us who have already been changed by Jesus, who've made the decision to follow him, my hope is that this message encourages you to share just how amazing Jesus is with someone that you know needs to hear it. To tell them that Jesus changes everything because it could be exactly what they need to hear, and it could be the difference that it makes in their life. You know, when we launched this campus about 5 months ago, one of the families that started coming because they had received one of our mailers was the Pineda family. And I met Chris and Rebecca and their two girls early on. And one of their daughters, Sophie, she was one of our first baptisms here at Compass North Fort Worth. And this was just an amazing family. I knew right off the bat. When I asked that question a few weeks ago, what's the most amazing thing you've ever experienced? Rebecca was one of the people who reached out to me. She said, Chris and I, we have a story we'd like to share. It's an amazing story, but I can't just type it out on Facebook. It's too long. Would you be willing to meet with me and Chris and connect with us and hear our story? So I found some time in my schedule and I said, sure, I'll come to your house and we can talk about it and you can share your story. But I got to their house that night and I walked in and I sat down in their living room and when I sat down, they said this. They said, you know, you may not know this about us, but we don't just have 2 daughters. We actually have 3 daughters. And they pointed to a picture that was behind me on the wall. And I turned around and I looked up at the wall and there was a little girl who had all these tubes attached to her, lying in a hospital bed in this picture. I never got to meet their 3rd daughter. Their 3rd daughter's name is Madison. Madison Rose, a beautiful little girl who passed away about 2 years ago, next month. And Chris and Rebecca began to tell me their story of what had happened in Madison's life. You see, she was born a perfectly fine little girl, and one day she ended up having a stroke. And then continued seizures happened after that, and part of her brain ended up dying in the midst of that. And so she ended up being hooked up to these tubes for the rest of her life. And over the next 3 years, they talked about how Madison's life was the most amazing thing to them because, you see, not only were they going through the difficulties of their little girl struggling, they also were going through some marriage struggles. But they said that because of what Madison is going through, it changed things in their marriage, it changed their faith, and ultimately it changed the lives of other people. And as they told me the story, it just kept getting better and better because through it all, they just kept pointing towards Jesus and trusting in him. Well, the day of Madison's memorial service came, and there was one more amazing thing that they shared with me that I said, can I share that at our campus? It's powerful. Can I share that? And they said, of course, because if it helps someone else experience Jesus for the first time, that's what we want to do. And so I asked Rebecca if she would write the words of what happened on that day, and I'm going to share those with you today. Listen to what she wrote. She said, our daughter lived 3 years, 9 months, and 21 days. And in that short amount of time, taught us and those around her more about the pursuit of Christ than my husband and I learned our whole lives as Christians. Throughout Madison's life, we were able to witness the countless people grow closer to God or surrender to him for the very first time. One of the most special moments was at her memorial service. I stood at the podium recounting her life story, telling everyone in the room how to look at Madison's face was to know that you were staring at the grace of God. I spoke of understanding the moment when God asked us to give her back to him and how he knew her purpose was complete. We knew her purpose was complete, and it was time for her to rest in our Savior's arms. And like many, many times before, we let God be our strength and our guidance. Then a few days gone by, when my strength was weakening and my humanity was wishing to just go back, I get a call. There's a man at my father's office who had spent his life renouncing that God was who he said he was. But he was there that day of the memorial service. That day I recounted the amazing things God did in our daughter's life, and God spoke to him through me. That man came to my father and he told him that he had surrendered to Christ and to tell us the power that our daughter was given by God. You see, that one encounter from Jesus, that one touch from Jesus, that one word from Jesus changed everything for this man, and he surrendered his life to God. And that one encounter, that one touch, that one word from Jesus could change your lives too. And all you have to do is surrender to him. And so as we close out our time today, here's what we want to do. We want to give you that opportunity. We want to give you that chance today to surrender your life to him, maybe for the first time. And maybe you came in this place today and maybe you experienced Jesus for the first time today. Maybe you heard a word from Jesus for the first time today, or maybe you've been touched by Jesus for the first time today. We want to give you that chance to receive him into your life, to surrender your life to him. And so we're going to sing the song of commitment today, a song of invitation. And up at the front here, there's some towels. We'd ask if you're ready to make that decision to follow Christ and maybe to be baptized, just come to the front, grab one of these towels, and then just head to the back, and our decision counselors will be back there. They would love to talk with you and help you get ready, get prepared. Because as you noticed when you came in today, there's a baptism tank right outside. And we're going to have that opportunity today. And we know that there are a few that are going to make that decision today, and we're celebrating that. But my guess is that there are some that God maybe is speaking to for the first time today. And maybe you need to make that decision as well. And look, I know there might be an excuse, well, I don't have anything to change into. I'm not prepared for it today, Pastor Nate. Well, you can go home wet, or we're prepared for you. See these bags? We got everything you need to change into. And so you can get in the tank in the clothes that you're wearing and then go home in these clothes. We got everything. And all you got to do, just pick up one of those towels and say, today is the day that I surrender my life to Christ. And so right now, here's what I want you to do. I just want you to stand up. I want you to stand up. Go ahead, stand up. And we're going to sing this song today. And if you're ready to make that decision, just come to the front, grab one of these towels, or you can head to the back. There's towels available in the back as well. And then our decision counselors will meet you there. Or if you're not sure yet, if you're not sure what you're going to do, if you're not sure what you're ready to do, you can always, this card that you received when you came in, you can just check these off and someone from our team will reach out to you this week. This is a decision card and it's an opportunity for you to make a decision. I promise you it'll be the best decision that you ever make. So as we sing this song, if you'd like to make that decision today, why don't you come to the front as we sing?